There are three value generation patterns associated with EF Core. There's a no value generation, meaning that you must always supply a valid value to be saved to a database. This value must be assigned to new entities before they can add the context. You can also generate a value on add, so when you add a new entity, this value will automatically be generated to associate with the specific property. The value that is generated for added entities will depend on the database provider being used. Database providers may automatically set up value generation for some properties, but others may require you to manually set up how the value is generated. For example, when you use SQL Server, values will always automatically be generated for GUID properties. However, if you specify that a datetime property is generated on add, then you must set up a way for the value to be generated, such as the getDate to associate the method for your column value. So the reason you would want to generate properties is sometimes it's good to have like a timestamp to associate with the property when an entity has values being inserted. If you add an entity to the context that has values assigned to the primary property, then Entity Framework will attempt to insert the value rather than generating a new one. You can also generate a value on add or update. A values generated on add or update means that a new value is generated each time that a record is saved, whether you're implementing an insert or an update. So there are different ways to implement automatically generated properties in EF Core. So the simplistic way of doing this is that you can say no value is generated, period. So let's say we want to come over here and we want to put, using data annotations, database generated, and then you can put right here, pull in using system component model.dataannotations.schema. And then once we have that, we can say database generated option, and we can say none. So we don't want a generated value to associated to this car ID column by default. So it means that when we insert or update into this entity, we have to provide this value. Now we can also come in here and put the value generated on add. So we're going to come down here, we're going to say prop tab, and we're going to create a date time and say my date. And right here, we can come down here and we can say the same as we did before, database generated. And we can say database generated option. And we're going to say that this is an identity. So on add, this is going to always generate the value associated with this specific column, which is going to be a date time to associate right here on our entity. This is specifically a value generated on add. If we want to do it an and or update, we can copy this real quick and let's comment this out. And we can come down here and we could change this to computed. And right here, the database generates a value when the row is inserted or updated. So this will automatically change it once you create or update this record associated with this column value. So this is a way to implement it with data annotations. We can also do this with the Fluent API as we've done previously. So we can come over here and we can say for generated values, we can do the model builder dot entity, and we're going to be doing the car entity. So let's say car property, and we're going to say x dot, and we want to associate this to value never generated. So we can come over here to car ID, and then we can say right here, value never generated. So this will ensure that the value is never generated for that specific property. So we can come over here to our comments, never value. Then we can come over here, and we could say right here, value generated on add. So we can copy this real quick. And we could say right here, instead of car ID, we want to have my date time. Instead of having value generated never, we can have value generated on add. And this will be when the value is actually added. And then the final one we can have here, we can copy this again. And we could see add or update. And the last thing that we will change here is this method call right here. And this will be value generated on add or update. And you can see the definition. It configures a property to have a value generated only when saving a new or existing entity. And that will be right there. So we have properties that we can associate to never generate a value generated on add, and a value generated on add or update, and we can implement this logic inside of our Fluent API on the onModel creating method, or we can implement it directly on the properties itself that we have right here.